So seeing as I don't speak Spanish, I can only guess as to what Adolfo just said about me. But hi, everybody. So I'm Sisi Wei. Thank you, Media Lab Prado, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to explain a little bit about what ProPublica does, which I think Adolfo did as well. But to get everybody on the same page, ProPublica is an investigative nonprofit newsroom. So we don't have the same structure as most of the other journalism organizations in the United States. Oh, yes, okay. We don't have the same structure as many of the other journalism organizations in the United States. So we are completely grant funded, meaning people donate money to us. We also ask large foundations in the US to give us money for a specific purpose. And then when we create articles, when we create apps, which I will talk about in 1 second, all of it is essentially free. And what I mean by that is it's free for the public to read, but it's also free for any other journalism organization to republish. So all you have to do is give us credit, but all of our work is released under Creative Commons. So that's ProPublica. We just turned 8 years old as an organization 2 months ago, I think. But, so more about what I do there. I work on a team called the News Applications team. So here's everybody. Here's pretty much everybody that works on my team. We work on large searchable databases that are useful to the public. So to give you a really quick example, last year, I published probably the biggest project that I've ever worked on. It's called Surgeon's Scorecard. What it is it focuses on 8 routine but completely optional surgeries that thousands of people get every day in the United States. So one example is maybe you need a knee replacement, right? So it's something that happens to a lot of people, but what is missing is essentially how good are surgeons at performing these knee surgeries? And as a patient, in the US at least, you certainly have no idea of really knowing unless you know people at the hospital or there's somebody that you have a personal connection with that you can ask for a doctor's reputation. So what we did is essentially create an app that allows people for the first time to look up the name of a surgeon and see basically how often have their patients had complications after getting that surgery. And an example of a complication is, say, now you have an infection that you didn't have before, right? So as a journalism outlet, you can imagine there's no way that we could write that many articles to cover all of the surgeons we have data for. And therefore, teams like mine, the news apps team at ProPublica, we make essentially a mini website that allows you to search for somebody that you know, be it your parent, surgeon, someone you're looking at, and see essentially their track record. So that's what I mean by we make large searchable databases for the public. But today, what I want to talk to you all about is using technology and how we go about it to actually collect data from the public and then to give it away back to them. All right, so collecting data. A lot of the project proposals that I heard today and read on the website were always about opening up data, keeping data accountable, collecting data, or otherwise helping make it more accessible to the public. And so as a developer and as a journalist, when I think about projects like that, I basically think about what can technology do to enable the public to want to participate, make it easier for them to actually do the project and to help you collect data that could help everybody else. So today I'm going to show you 3 apps that we have created which really relied on the public in order to work to begin with. And then I'll summarize some of the lessons that we learned to make that happen. And then I'll show you 2 apps that we've done recently that help give our data away. All right, so this first project is called Message Machine. Jeff Larson and Al Shaw, 2 of my colleagues, they made this project in 2012. And their goal in this project was to answer one question: which was in the United States presidential campaigns in 2012, did any campaign target people based on sex, race, age, or any other factor when they're emailing them? Okay? And so to get that information, what we needed to do was to ask people to tell us, one, who you are, or what demographic you fall under, and then what kinds of emails are you getting, right? The one option that we considered but didn't do was personally signing up for all of the campaigns. The reason why we decided not to do that, even though it would have made our lives a lot easier, is because some of the campaigns, when you sign up, you have to declare that you support the candidate. And so as journalists, for about half the campaigns, we didn't think we could do that ethically. And so we asked the public to do it on our behalf. So as you get an email from a campaign, we basically gave you an email address, just forward it to us, and then optionally, you could tell us through a form what are your demographics. But you don't have to tell us that in order to forward us emails. We'll take anybody's emails. All right. So in about 4 months, we got 43,000 campaign emails sent to us by about 665 readers. Out of those 665, 600 of them actually shared their demographic information. And about 547 of them emailed us multiple times when they got more and more emails. So that's not bad. What you're seeing up here is basically the number of copies that we got for a given email. So in this case, it's Obama for America had an email whose subject was "She's a Mom." And on the left and on the right are two different sort of versions of the email that people got. And you could see from our website what the differences were, and you could figure out which one did you get. So the largest finding of this project was probably the least surprising, which is that campaigns change the amount of money they will ask you for based on exactly how much money you have donated in the past. Right? That was the biggest trigger. The only other thing that we really recognized was that if you lived in a swing state, so if your state, oftentimes presidential campaigns, could vote either way, your emails were also tweaked as well. Okay. So at the same time, we were also working on a project called Free the Files. So this project was for the same presidential election, but if you wanted to find out how much candidates and their campaigns were paying for a spot on TV, right? So how much do they pay for a TV advertisement? You had to physically go down to the TV station and ask them to look through their records. There just wasn't any electronic information at all. And so since we couldn't do that, and we really wanted to know this information, we actually asked readers to go to their TV stations for us and give us scanned PDFs and email them to us. So that's a really big ask, right? That's a lot of work. We basically got 300 people across the country who were willing to physically go to a TV station. But turns out that was just phase one, because while we were doing the project, the government issued an order basically saying that all TV stations have to start posting their records online. So they can't just keep them literally in the basement anymore. But they could post them online however they wanted, which meant everybody put them up as PDFs. So they were different from station to station. Some people's were just completely handwritten, and we couldn't teach a computer, essentially, to read them for us. And ProPublica has made PDF reading software ourselves for other projects, and none of it worked on this one. So that is where phase two came in. Instead of telling you to physically go to a TV station, we asked people, why don't you help us read some PDFs? So this is what that looked like. We let people create an account using their Facebook account, and they could keep track of how many files that they had freed or basically logged for us, and then they can get recognized on our leaderboards as well. And we also designed these pages to be totally distraction-free. Everything else that would normally be on our website, we took completely off so that people could focus on what they were doing. So how many people actually participated? Oh, and this is just an example of what it looks like. Basically, everything else about our website is gone. You have 4 questions that you need to answer before you hit submit, and you automatically get a new one after that. Okay, so the cool thing about this project is that Like I said before, how swing states are treated differently. If you lived in a swing market, meaning if there's a TV station in your area that is likely to have all the residents vote one way or another, we would let you pick, just give me files from those locations. So those are sort of the options over there. You can see Las Vegas, Nevada as one of the options. And this prompted people to get together in person to try and read PDFs for us. So this isn't something that we put together, but that volunteers, after seeing this option, self-organized. So this is what they said. It's easy, it's important for democracy, and there's pizza, which we didn't provide, but they did on their own. Not sure how it gets much better than that. But what you're seeing here too is that we have a Facebook group. So something that we did for this project, very simple step, is that if you decided to volunteer, we would put you in a group together and you would have access to each other. So we didn't moderate it much after that. We didn't put a lot of content in there, but we basically gave people access to everybody doing the same thing. And then events like this started happening on their own. And so we heard feedback and we made changes to the app so that people could do the freeing a little easier. And in the end, we had about 1,000 volunteers participate, and they logged 18,000 PDFs for us. And what was kind of amazing is that all of the money counts up to about $1 billion that now we have electronic records for. But what you can really see in terms of community building is that certain swing markets were just completely logged. People clearly cared about where they lived, and they would all get together and they would try to do every single file in like 2 nights, something like that. So that was really cool. So then that brings me to the last project, Surgeon's Scorecard. So I mentioned this app at the very beginning. If you want to know more about the app itself, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it anytime this week. But I bring this up because it's our latest app in a whole series of projects about patient safety, right? So how safe are you in America, in hospitals, with your doctor? And the years of community building that we did here was something that I was lucky to inherit, meaning by the time I started working on this project, 2 of our reporters had already been building a community for about 2 years. And you might notice a theme here. They were doing it through a Facebook group. So this group, we put a lot more work into. Basically, it's for people who have suffered any type of harm while they're undergoing medical care, or somebody in their family or someone that they know are in the same situation, and they also really care about the issue. It has about 3,000 members, and people post multiple times per day, and it's unprompted by us. What we do is we monitor this specifically for people who are yelling obscenities, or if they're trying to derail the conversation. But otherwise, we don't really monitor exactly what people share. And so for us, some days it's sort of just a way for us to tell people what we're writing, but other days it's been a great way for us to find people in the community, to find sources, to tell us information that we might see in data and need somebody to verify. And for the members, this is probably the best part, is that for them, it's become a place where they can lean on each other and get advice, right? It's like we're only a fly on the wall. We're just sort of watching at this point, and the people who are part of the group are clearly getting more out of it than we are. So, using this Facebook group, we wanted to get some mixture of qualitative and quantitative data on what was happening in terms of patient harm in America. So we asked all of these people to fill out a survey. And it looks like that. Looks terrible. This is our patient harm questionnaire. This already looks really long. There's 2 more pages that I couldn't fit on the slide. And what's kind of crazy is that 1,000 people decided to fill the entire thing out, right? So that's about 1 in 3 people in our Facebook group, which is a pretty big portion. And we've interviewed a lot of the subjects after we did this, and now we sort of are doing statistical analysis on the data itself for an upcoming project as well. So it's been an incredible asset just for writing, but also for data verification. All right. So what did we learn from those 3 projects, right? All of them really depended on the public. If they didn't participate, we wouldn't have anything to show for it, right? So the first thing is if you enable the public to act on specifically what they care about. So oftentimes there's a lot of projects in which you can do this. If you're a member of the public, you can try to find on the website exactly how do I help my community, but it's not made readily apparent or easily available. So my #1 lesson from that is that if you make it easy, people know what they want and they'll gravitate towards it. So in Message Machine, right, we were asking people to send us campaign emails they were already getting. We're not asking you to sign up for a lot of them. Just forward us the ones that you already have because you're already interested in those campaigns for some reason. And then in Free the Files, we let volunteers work on PDFs from their markets, and that's where we saw those big parties crop up. Next. Make participating easy, right? So for Message Machine, we worked really hard to say, can we just get these people to forward us an email? They don't have to come to our website. They don't have to type in anything related to ProPublica except hitting forward, right? In Free the Files, we got rid of everything else. We even got rid of all of the ads on the website so that you have nothing else to look at, essentially, right? And they are able to get in the zone, and they just get one a PDF after another until they decide, okay, I'm done for today. #3 is give instant feedback, or as quickly as you can manage giving them feedback. So this was really crucial in Free the Files. What we found that people loved is that on our homepage, we would have live progress reports on what percentage of files were completed in a location. So it would say 90% of all the files in Las Vegas are done, right? So that gives the entire community something to be proud of, as opposed to just rewarding people for their individual accomplishments. #4 is build community by giving volunteers access to each other. So local parties we've talked about before, but also the patient safety Facebook group, right? That's sort of where we really realized how important this was. Everybody knows that if you have comments on any website, it gets really vicious really quickly, right? That's just sort of normal on the internet now. But what's crazy about this Facebook group is that the tone has always been entirely different than what we see on our normal website. And it's not a closed Facebook group. Anybody can join, essentially. But because the people in it are so invested and have found other people that they wouldn't have otherwise, they keep using it, and therefore we keep benefiting from it as well. Okay. All right, so what about giving our data away? What have we been doing in that department? This is the ProPublica election data bot. A few weeks ago, we published this, and it's a project that is meant to be a resource for just political journalists in the United States, or anybody who is specifically interested in local politics, or following politics very closely. So what do I mean by that? We make a lot of searchable databases, right? We have apps that track United States members of Congress and how they vote, whether or not they showed up to vote, how much money is being spent on them, how much money they're spending, and these are all separate apps. What we decided for this election is to put all of that together and let people get notified of that information as soon as possible. So during the election and the months leading up to it, it's sort of the ultimate tool for local reporters and local people who are interested in what's going on with a single campaign or 5 or 6 different campaigns. So we give them basically a chance to subscribe to any campaign or to any organization involved with the election. So this example is Hillary Clinton. What you probably see a little bit right up here is that it says, get alerts on this candidate. And so you sign in with your Google account, and you can get alerts on anybody that you want to. And what happens is, 1, you can just leave your browser open. We won't bother you. And this will automatically update anytime we get new information. But if you don't want to stay there, right, you could basically give us permission to send you an email anytime we have any new data on everybody that you've signed up to get alerts for. So the way that looks is like this, right? So it's a very simple email, but anytime, let's say you're following Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, anytime any of them files anything, or they miss a vote, or they vote in a way that is so different than everybody else, we basically send you an email. And you get it delivered straight as soon as the internet knows that it happens. Okay, so that's one option. The other option is that we've been working on something called the ProPublica data store for about 2 to 3 years. So this is the closest thing that we have to open data portal that a lot of the projects are interested in looking at or building. Originally, our editor had the idea to start this because we got many, many requests for our data constantly from a lot of different types of people. And so we figured it might be easier if we make it standard and we have a place where everybody can see what are all the possible data sets I could get from ProPublica. And so we have 3 tiers of data. There's basically data that we give away for free. There's data that we link to externally because we use it so often. And then there's data that we charge money for. So how do we break that down? Anything that we get from the government, we put in a request, we fight for however many years, and then we get the data back. We put up exactly what they gave us so that no one else has to go through that process again, right? Oftentimes, a lot of journalists in the US file a freedom of information request, and you may or may not hear anything. They may or may not break laws while telling you that they're working on it because nothing happens, and you have to say, hey, by law, you're required to give me an update in 21 days, and I haven't heard anything from you. So we put all of that data up for free. Other times, we are actively getting data from a reliable place, so we just link out. We don't create our own copy. We use whatever is directly on that website, and so we offer those resources for free as well. And then finally, what we sell is the cleaned up, organized, and then improved data sets that we make for our own apps. So what that means is essentially one of our first apps ever is something called Dollars for Docs. So it's basically money for doctors. And before the government in maybe 2 years ago actually started implementing a law saying that any company that makes drugs, if you're paying a doctor anything, you have to disclose it online, right? So that wasn't true before, now it is. But when ProPublica first started this project, I think 5 years ago, we basically had to combine tons of different data sources together, and that was drug companies or court cases, anywhere we could find this data and putting it all in one place. So that's sort of the type of data that we would charge money for because we put so much work into it, essentially. But the other sort of nice thing about that is how much money we charge depends on what type of entity you are. So if you're a journalist, we basically don't charge any money. If you're an academic, we charge basically a nominal fee. But if you're a commercial company wanting to use this for your business, then we charge you a significant amount of money to use it. And so we sort of have these tiers based on how free we think the data should be for that use, right? All right. And then finally, and this is something that I think a lot of projects could consider if you wanted to, a variation of this. When we publish large data sets that we think are really helpful, and we know that we're not telling all of the stories that are in it, we write something called a reporting recipe. So what that is basically an article, but what we do is we tell you what columns of the data you should pay attention to, and then we give you maybe 5 story ideas for any local reporter, what you should check out. So check out this data point and this data point, and if they're really different, you have a story. And we basically write these templates for people to do across the country. And that works out really well for us, and people use our data, and they publish stories that we would love to publish, but we just don't have the capacity. All right, so that is it. So that's my Twitter and my email. But I would really like to open it up for questions from you guys. I can talk about any of the projects that you've seen up here, or if there's a ProPublica project that you are curious about, I can probably tell you about most of the projects that we've published before as well. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, waiting for the microphone. Oh.
Una pregunta directa.
Hello.
It's a new format.
Yeah.
Ask to Sisi Wei.
Well, you say Sisi, well, the ProPublica has turned 8 years old.
Yeah.
And
Wait a minute.
My flight was great. Yeah, it's not working.
Hello. Here it is. You can choose your position.
thank you. Sisi, you said ProPublica turns 8 years old, and I don't know at what time you and your team start to do the work with the data and the apps. Was at the beginning, at the very beginning, or start before of the beginning ProPublica?
Yeah.
Because sorry, it's a two-part.
Yeah, yeah.
And because I was wondering how much influence has the identity that ProPublica gained before to start to create the community in terms of a project like my project that is just starting.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is create an identity and then start to create the community?
That's a great question. So basically, let's see really quick here. My team, we're probably, I guess it's 8 of us full-time right now. I think it's 9. We have one person that we hired recently as well. We did not start out as 9 people. When ProPublica was first founded, my editor, who is the first person on the top left, Scott Klein, was interviewed for a job for ProPublica, and they wanted him to be the webmaster. So basically the guy who runs the website. And webmaster is a term, at least in the US, that we rarely use anymore for jobs. And at the time, he basically told ProPublica, I don't think that that makes a lot of sense. I think you should put together a team of journalists who use technology to do this kind of work. And Scott has told me that at the time, he wasn't really looking for a new job, so he was just telling ProPublica what he thought it should do. And they liked it so much that they wanted to hire him to do that. And when it first started, it was just him and Jeff, who's right underneath Scott. So there's just 2 of them. And I would say they probably worked a lot on small graphics and data analysis first, before we started cultivating entire projects with communities. But the way that projects have always worked at ProPublica is because Scott made it clear at the beginning that if you are working in technology, you should also be considered a journalist at this organization. we sort of got the same freedom as our reporters to pitch projects ourselves. So if I thought something was really important, I could say, this is the project I want to work on, and here's why it's investigative, here's why it affects a lot of people, and why it should be a story that's told. And at the end, we make an app, but in between, we basically get a lot of liberty to decide how we're going to go about doing it. And so I think because we were so small, the entire organization was less than 20 people maybe. We also had a lot of freedom to do this kind of thing because we weren't a normal news organization. So a lot of new and young news organizations cover breaking news. We don't do that. We only do investigative journalism, and so it gives us some leeway and freedom to do longer-term projects and to think about, if I really wanted to invest in this, what else could I do? But obviously, if it's your first project out the gate, you probably just want to start on something that you can publish and establish yourself just in the industry first, and then at the same time, work on longer-term projects that you are cultivating your community for. Any other questions? Yeah. I'm gonna just step here because I can't see you up there.
Hello. I'm very impressed by the work of ProPublica. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I was wondering how much are you depending on financially? How are you living from only donations or by selling the data sets? Which is the most important part for you to stay independent economically?
Yes, that is a great question. The amount of money we earn from selling data is not a lot of money compared to how much money ProPublica raises. So the first year that we did the data store, I was the designer, and after about 12 months, so 1 year, I think it was able to pay my salary. So that was kind of nice, salary of one full-time staff person. But ProPublica runs on a $10 million annual budget. And so that's sort of just a very small part of that. Are you guys interested in me talking about how we work financially? Yeah. So basically, ProPublica was created because Herb and Marion Sandler, who are a couple who own the Sandler Foundation, wanted to create some type of journalism organization that would focus on long-term featured projects. They didn't know that they wanted it to be investigative until they went to our first president, Paul Steiger, who was editing the Wall Street Journal at the time. And he said, I think that without money from philanthropy, investigative journalism is not going to survive because it takes the longest and the payoff isn't as obvious, right? And you only see it months down the line. And so he convinced them to essentially pick investigative journalism as the topic and the type of newsroom to create. And what the Sandler Foundation did was they committed to essentially three years of funding our entire budget if we couldn't raise any more money on our own. So for the first year, all $10 million came from one place. If you do any nonprofit fundraising, you know that that's sort of not a good thing. You want your money to come from a lot of different places so that if one funder pulls out, you still have money. And so currently, I think we're in our 8th year. We are less than 25%, maybe less than 30% funded by the Sandler Foundation. And the rest of our money, the other 70%, comes from a bunch of different places. It's all donations, pretty much, and it can also be private individual donations. So anybody who wants to could donate to ProPublica, and we're working on getting that number up. But financially speaking, we're doing really well. Our annual budget, I think, has increased to maybe $12 million a year at this point. And we're trying to see if we can establish any type of not endowment, but at least a reserve fund for in case there's a really bad year, we still have money left over that can cover those expenses. Other questions? Or follow-up questions about what I just said? Yeah, I've also heard just from people that I've spoken with that internationally, or at least in Europe, there aren't as many large foundations that are seeking to sort of give philanthropically large amounts of money. And so there have been a lot of places, European journalists who have come to visit ProPublica, trying to figure out how we structured ourselves financially and as a newsroom, but they can't find similar funding in Europe, or at least not at that volume. So I don't know if that's your experience, but that's what I've heard.
Do you know if there are like other similar organizations like outside the States?
Yeah, outside of the US. The one organization that comes to mind is the, I think it's the say that again? ICIJ, right? I think International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. They are completely international. So there are journalists in the US as well, but essentially they come together. I think they're the organization that released the Panama Papers. Yeah, so the ICIJ, that's the biggest one I can think of outside of the United States.
Mark
There.
Cabra is the leader of the data journalism team.
Yes.
So she will be on October the 4th for the data journalism event at Medial Prado. Bueno, que estará el día 4 en Medial Prado para el evento este que no tiene todavía página web, pero cuya agenda ya sabemos dos cosas, que va a venir Pablo de la cooperativa Enreda, que es el que ha desarrollado Tipi Ciudadano, y que va a asistir Marc Cabra. Poco a poco os voy, ¿no? de aquí al día 4 os voy adelantando fechas y sigue sin estar la página web. I think when it's very interesting to hearing from you all the information from ProPublica, sorry, but and I truly understand the question because my first question was the same. When I knew about ProPublica, it was like, well, where does the money come from?
Yeah.
You know, because here in Spain we have a particular scenario. We have been, we are like in the first world of everything, of information, of projects or money. But at the same time, we don't have, you know, people who I collaborate with don't have money, and when you ask them to come to Visualizar or data journalism events or this kind of events, they say, but okay, but where does the money come from? I don't know, the open knowledge, all these awesome projects that are like, you know, with, you can see the budget. You can feel the budget. You can feel that they are with really money behind of them. And well, I think it's the scenario of United States and is different from Europe because of that kind of foundations or of model of foundations where you can give money to a foundation and so your taxes, you can pay less taxes.
Right.
And it's different from Spain. But at the same time, there are a lot of foundations, like the Knight Foundation, you know.
Yeah.
We usually have relationship with Open News from Mozilla and Knight Foundation, or Sunlight, or I don't know, not for, but there are a lot of open society. There are a lot of foundations investing money in data journalism or journalism, but not in Spain, because Spain is like we are in the first league, in the first world, and so we have to look for this kind of events. We have to to figure out how to make, how to get money. And I think that's the reason of our question.
Yeah.
And that's our challenge.
If anyone is interested in really detailed information about ProPublica's financials, because we are a not-for-profit in the United States, meaning if you donate to us, you don't have to pay as much taxes, we release a form every year called the 990, so 990, that basically details our largest donors, how much our top 10 staffers are paid, like our income, all of that. So if you're interested, all of that is on the internet. Yeah.
So you're doing more than Donald Trump so far, disclosing that. But my question is about the other papers, the other news organizations. Are they contacting you to, because I think you have gained that kind of legitimacy, having that pool of journalists and not just people good at typing.
Yeah.
But being journalists and producing data, are other newspaper organizations contacting you to commend you, to ask you for producing data for them?
So you mean, do other news organizations contact us and ask for data, or ask for their section of the data? Is that what you're asking?
Contacting you to create new sets of data
for
them to work on.
Right, I see. Yeah, that happens a lot, actually. We don't always say yes, because we just are really swamped sometimes. But I think there's actually a project right now where a local New York reporter contacted us. I won't be too specific about it, because it's still happening, but she wanted to collect a series of data sets about, let's just say, like crime in New York City, and she really wanted our help doing it. And it fit into sort of ProPublica's mission and the type of stories that we cover. And so she sort of comes into our office once or twice a week now, and we work on that with her together. So we do a lot of partnerships at ProPublica, sometimes internationally as well, where regardless of whether it's an app or a story, since we're a nonprofit website, we have sort of this non-threatening feeling about us in terms of if we write a story or do an app that is really going to affect people in one location, we just go to the biggest media organization there and we say, would you like to publish this for free at the same time that we publish it? And oftentimes they say yes, and it's because we want to reach their readers specifically. Other times they want to work together. So we work with National Public Radio a lot, NPR in the United States, and when we do that, we're usually reporting out the entire story or building the apps with them and with people who work there. And then we publish it together as both ProPublica and NPR work.
Hello? And you think you're more able to create that kind of context, that kind of cooperation, because you are a non-profit organization and not meaning not being a competitor to these other press organizations?
Right, because if you think about, this is just me thinking now, but if you think about how competition works in at least the United States journalism market, it's about like who is paying money to see your content, right? So either I'm paying for a print subscription to a newspaper or I pay for a digital subscription. ProPublica just doesn't have any of that, and we also don't cover news in the same way, right? So you can't depend on us to tell you everything that's happened on, you know, like the latest piece of breaking news. We just won't cover it. We also won't cover like an arts and culture event unless there's something really shady and corrupt going on. And so you're always going to need other news. And so for us, you could never use us to replace anybody else. We're just not comprehensive that way. Any other questions? Yeah?
Given you cover shady and corrupt articles, are any staff members being threatened or something like that because of the type of articles or the way or the news you cover?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To my knowledge, none of our staff members have been physically threatened, except for like, if, you know, like, get out of my house right now, otherwise. But, you know, not sort of like repeat threats in the mail, that kind of a thing. What people will do is they really like to call us or something, and they say like, you know, this article was completely false, you have no integrity, I'm gonna tell everybody that. Or I'm gonna stop donating to ProPublica or something like that. But I am surprised as well that nobody on our staff has been like repeatedly threatened in that way. Because we've covered some really, really sort of shady things in which our sources are threatened, but the journalists, for some reason, at least to my knowledge, has not been threatened quite like that.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You feel better?
Yeah, for sure.
Si no hay más preguntas, yo le preguntaría muchas cosas, pero tengo la voz fatal y, en fin, no puedo dejar de agradecerte que estés aquí. Muchas gracias, Sisi. Thanks for accepting our invitation and for coming to Madrid. And it has been a big pleasure and an honor for us to take on you and to have your person here in this Media Lab Prado, where we are from 2014 organizing meetings about data journalism and data visualization. So now you are in our wall of, you know, of people. And well, nada más por hoy. Un fuerte aplauso antes de que...
Thank you. And if you think of anything, I'm here all week if you don't want to ask in front of everybody.
Va a estar con nosotros hasta el día 2 de octubre, así que tenemos tiempo para, si nos ha intimidado pues aquí en esta sala, poder preguntarle más en directo, ¿no? Y más en la corta distancia. Muchas gracias a todos, a todas las que estáis ahí al otro lado del streaming. Ha sido un placer esta sesión inaugural de Visualizar 16 y nos vemos mañana por la mañana a las colaboradoras y miembros del taller, y mañana por la tarde volvemos a las 6:30 con Craig Mills de Visuality, Sergio Leiva de Carto, Alberto de Quadrigram y Mariano de la Fundación Zaragoza Ciudad del Conocimiento. Muchas gracias y hasta mañana.